Greetings, everyone, and welcome to True Crime Inspector. Today we delve into a harrowing case that unfolded in 2012 involving Marcos Matsunaga, one of Brazil's wealthiest individuals. This high-profile incident took center stage when Marcos mysteriously vanished on the eve of a billion-dollar business deal, sending shockwaves across the entire nation. The heart-wrenching images of the bereaved widow of the millionaire dominated the front pages of leading national publications. Initially, the police pursued the theory that rival competitors might have orchestrated the kidnapping and elimination of Marcos to thwart the impending deal. However, the grim and unsettling truth that came to light was far more sinister. The narrative evolved into a chilling tale of calculated murder and a grotesque attempt to conceal the crime, later becoming the subject of numerous documentaries. Let's begin by introducing Marcos Matsunaga. Marcos was a prominent entrepreneur and one of Brazil's wealthiest individuals, heading the family-owned business Yoki, renowned for producing various food products. The roots of this enterprise trace back to Marcos's grandfather, Yoshizo Kitano, who had immigrated from abroad. The brand name, Yoki, was ingeniously derived from the initials of his first and last names. The inception of this future business empire occurred in the mid-20th century, starting as a modest flour milling venture that not only survived, but thrived during times of crisis and war. Over the years, it transformed into a colossal company with a global reputation and an extensive product range. Marcos, born into opulence, never experienced deprivation during his upbringing. Unlike many entrepreneurs who build their businesses from the ground up, Marcos inherited a legacy created by his grandfather and father. As the CEO of the family's food company, he had the potential to become the first billionaire in his lineage, a goal he relentlessly pursued throughout his life. Those who knew Marcos personally acknowledged his competence as a businessman, as he not only preserved, but substantially augmented the family's wealth, leading to substantial profit increases. However, Marcos was far from an uncomplicated individual. He possessed a capricious and arrogant demeanor, coupled with a demanding and controlling nature towards those in his proximity. Additionally, his physical appearance was less than conventionally attractive. Struggling with childhood obesity, vision impairments necessitating glasses, and a stature that was notably shorter, he presented a somewhat ungainly figure. From a young age, these challenges posed numerous difficulties for Marcos in his interactions with peers. He found himself lacking in friends, and the opposite sex shunned this peculiar and unconventional individual. Building long-lasting and meaningful relationships proved to be a formidable task for Marcos, as beyond a couple of initial dates, things rarely progressed further. Even with his substantial business empire and multi-million-dollar inheritance, he remained far from an enviable or desirable bachelor. His arrogance and egocentrism repelled women, and as a result, Marcos frequently turned to the services of escorts and individuals in the oldest profession. Public sources provide scarce information about Marcos's first wife. It is known, however, that their union was not founded on deep love or passion, but rather out of desperation and familial pressure. Despite these less-than-ideal circumstances, the marriage endured for several years, albeit with both spouses almost immediately experiencing regret regarding their decision to start a family. Initially, the young wife endeavored to accommodate the complex personality of the businessman, nurturing hopes that with time they could evolve into a contented couple capable of mutual support and understanding. However, her hopes were misplaced, and over the years their distance from each other only grew. Furthermore, Marcos openly engaged in extramarital affairs without any attempt to conceal or rationalize his behavior, frequently seeking companionship on websites where individuals offered intimacy in exchange for financial compensation. It was during this period that Alice entered the picture. She worked as an escort, with her portfolio accessible on relevant platforms. In this virtual realm, the businessman came across a striking and alluring blonde with an attractive physique, regularly extending invitations to her for dates, generously compensating her for her company. Alice was 6 years his junior, hailing from a destitute and dysfunctional family, residing in one of the city's most crime-ridden neighborhoods. Alice's upbringing was marred by adversity. She never knew her father, and her mother grappled with heavy alcoholism, frequently involving herself with men who shared her destructive addiction. The girl's childhood was marked by harshness and misery, as she suffered physical abuse, harassment, and exploitation at the hands of her mother's companions from a very tender age. Upon completing her schooling, Alice made a determined escape from her troubled home, leaving her childhood neighborhood behind forever. She pursued nursing courses and secured employment at a hospice. However, she soon realized that caring for terminally ill patients did not align with her dreams and abilities. Additionally, Alice was an emotionally sensitive and vulnerable young woman, prone to forming deep attachments with people. Each patient's demise in her care felt like a personal tragedy. A few years down the line, Alice made a pivotal decision to pursue higher education and embark on a complete career change. She set her sights on the field of law, considering it a promising path that could open numerous doors in her life. Preparation for the entrance exams had been a long journey for Alice, and she successfully secured the necessary scores. However, the financial aspect posed a significant hurdle, given her modest income as a nurse. Alice had severed all ties with her family after leaving home, leaving her without anyone to rely on. At this juncture, the young and attractive Alice, with her slender figure, made a fateful decision to leverage her physical attributes and registered on a specialized escort services website. On this platform, she received assistance in creating an appealing personal profile, and it wasn't long before affluent men began to express keen interest in the young blonde beauty. Escorting and providing intimate services brought Alice a substantial income, enabling her to fund her studies and sustain herself. Her intention, however, was always to transition away from this occupation upon obtaining her diploma and securing a job in her chosen field. During this phase of her life, Alice crossed paths with Marcos, who soon became one of her regular clients. He lavished her with gifts and saw her openly, without attempting to conceal their relationship from anyone. Aware of Marcos's marital status, Alice couldn't have fathomed that one of the wealthiest men in the country would eventually leave his wife for her. Alice's journey seemed like a modern-day Cinderella story. A destitute girl from a disadvantaged background, engaged in escort services, crosses paths with a multimillionaire who quickly falls head over heels in love with her. Marcos indeed became smitten, though it remains uncertain whether Alice actively engineered this affection. Approximately 6 months into their relationship, Marcos realized that he desired more than casual encounters with his young mistress. He yearned for a lasting commitment. Without hesitation or regret, he initiated divorce proceedings with his first wife and began introducing Alice to everyone as his fiancée. For obvious reasons, the businessman was keen to keep the true circumstances of their meeting and Alice's previous occupation concealed. The couple crafted a plausible tale of a chance encounter in a cafe, adhering to this version even with their closest relatives and a select few friends in Marcos's circle. Nevertheless, Alice's reception within the Matsunaga family was less than warm. The parents of the entrepreneur suspected that this attractive young woman had utilized her charms to win over the wealthy but visually unconventional Marcos, all while seemingly turning a blind eye to his challenging temperament. Nevertheless, when Marcos announced his intention to divorce his first wife and marry Alice, there were no vehement objections. The businessman orchestrated an extravagant wedding, following traditional customs, complete with a white gown, an extensive guest list, and a towering multi-tiered cake. Following the grand celebration, he relocated his new wife to his sprawling and opulent mansion, where she assumed the role of a full-fledged mistress. Matsunaga had long been renowned as an enthusiastic collector of costly wines and rare weaponry. A vast cellar was dedicated to housing his wine collection, meticulously organized by year and country of origin. The house also harbored a clandestine room, its walls adorned from floor to ceiling with an array of firearms and bladed weapons. Marcos took immense pride in his collections and dedicated himself to their continual expansion. In addition to these treasures, his residence overflowed with antiques, luxury items, and modern art, albeit somewhat haphazardly displayed on walls and surfaces. Shortly after their wedding, the couple expressed their desire to start a family, but despite their best efforts, Alice struggled to conceive naturally for an extended period. Subsequently, they opted for in vitro fertilization, which also took time before yielding results. When their daughter was eventually born, it appeared that the couple's happiness knew no bounds. The young parents dedicated themselves to nurturing their baby girl, crafting ambitious plans for their future. As their daughter grew, the entire family embarked on globe-trotting adventures, immersing themselves in diverse cultures and traditions. Their daughter blossomed into a veritable princess, raised amidst an environment of love, care, and opulence. However, the couple shared a very particular mutual interest: hunting large animals, primarily a passion of Marcos. Over time, he had attempted to share this interest with both his previous wives, but it had always met with resistance and aversion. Most women not only disliked this pastime, but found it thoroughly repulsive. Marcos had given up hope of finding a partner who would embrace his passion. Many now speculate that Alice took up hunting to further endear herself to Marcos and win his heart. Initially, they frequented shooting ranges together, where Alice acquired proficiency in handling various firearms. Subsequently, they ventured into the wilderness to hunt wild game. Alice harbored no qualms about taking the lives of animals. For her, it was a form of competition. Either you succeeded or you didn't. Marcos appreciated this approach and derived satisfaction from watching his wife wield her weapons and track her prey. He also imparted the skill of skinning and carving wild boars, deer, and other woodland creatures, with the two of them methodically dissecting their quarry using large knives, specialized cleavers, and axes. Notably, their family didn't keep cats or dogs as pets. Instead, they housed venomous snakes in specially designed terrariums, replicating conditions as close as possible to their natural habitat. This choice fulfilled another long-standing dream of Marcos, who held a deep affection for snakes. However, his first wife had vetoed the idea of having a terrarium at home. Alice had effectively indulged Marcos by embracing these rather unconventional hobbies. In the spring of 2012, the entrepreneur was on the brink of what could arguably be the most significant deal of his life and career. This deal had the potential to elevate him to billionaire status and take his income to unparalleled heights. He was engaged in active negotiations with several business partners, contemplating the sale of the family company, with the proceeds set to be invested in a new lucrative venture. During this period, Matsunaga rarely graced their home, wholly engrossed in work in the pursuit of his grandiose ambitions. He and his wife had moved into an upscale apartment complex situated in the city's business hub, conveniently proximate to the businessman's corporate headquarters. Marcos spent the majority of his time away from home, leaving his young wife alone in their luxurious apartment with its panoramic city view. His work schedule was meticulously regimented, with each minute accounted for. He was perpetually engrossed in meetings, business negotiations, and consultations with specialists. On many occasions, he didn't even return home overnight, assuring his wife that once the deal was finalized, their lives would undergo a profound transformation. Then came May 19, 2012, the eve of the billion-dollar deal, and Marcos vanished without a trace. It wasn't until the following day that his wife reported his absence, initially believing that Marcos was deeply engrossed in his work. According to Alice, her husband had an evening meeting scheduled, which was anticipated to extend late into the night. Furthermore, early the next morning, he was slated to meet with a crucial business partner. Thus, he packed some essentials, informed her that he would likely spend the night at the office, and head directly to the pivotal deal the following day. When Marcos failed to return home and ceased responding to calls, Alice grew increasingly apprehensive and reported him missing. The police quickly discovered that Marcos had neither attended his evening meeting nor the crucial morning appointment, both of which he could not have afforded to miss. This prompted immediate concerns that the millionaire had been abducted, and it was anticipated that ransom demands would soon arrive for the family. However, as the hours ticked by, followed by days, no ransom demands materialized, and hopes for Matsunaga's survival steadily dwindled. Meanwhile, investigators were far from idle. They initiated inquiries, questioning family members, friends, and business associates of the businessman, seeking to ascertain if he had any adversaries and who might stand to benefit from his disappearance or the derailment of the impending deal. Despite exhaustive efforts, no specific individuals emerged as potential culprits who might have harbored a motive to harm the businessman. Marcos had skillfully managed his business affairs, consistently making strategic decisions that benefited nearly everyone involved. Several days following the disappearance, Alice, accompanied by her young daughter, made her way to her father-in-law and mother-in-law's residence to disclose a revelation she had refrained from sharing with the police. With tears in her eyes, she revealed that her husband had been involved in a long-standing affair with a woman named Natasha Villarreal Lima, which he had not concealed. Although after several heated arguments and threats of divorce, Marcos had pledged to end the relationship to preserve their family. In reality, however, he continued to see Natasha, albeit more discreetly to avoid further family conflicts. Alice had grown suspicious and ultimately enlisted the services of a private detective to compile evidence of her husband's infidelity. She possessed photographs and videos capturing her husband on romantic rendezvous with Natasha. Interestingly, he took his new girlfriend to the same restaurants and entertainment venues frequented by him and his wife, in full view of acquaintances and onlookers. It was as if Marcos was flaunting his disdain for his wife, openly engaging in infidelity without any attempts at concealment. As it later transpired, Marcos had encountered Natasha Lima on the very same escort services website where he had initially met Alice. They had been seeing each other for approximately 5 months, during which time he had gifted her an expensive car and paid a substantial sum for Natasha to remove her profile from the website. Armed with this evidence, Alice confronted Marcos the day before his disappearance. However, instead of offering apologies and seeking forgiveness, he hastily packed his belongings, informed his wife of his intention to leave her, and then abruptly vacated their apartment, vanishing without a trace. Based on Alice's account, it appeared that her husband, driven by his passion, had opted to abscond with his new mistress. Yet, everyone who knew Matsunaga unanimously asserted that he could not simply abandon his business and disappear, given his unwavering dedication to the enterprise that his family had built over decades. Many questions remained unanswered until approximately a week later, when a passerby made a gruesome discovery in a desolate area, some 50 kilometers from the businessman's residence. The individual stumbled upon scattered garbage bags containing the remains of a human body. This grisly find was immediately reported to the police, and it was soon confirmed that the victim was none other than Marcos Matsunaga, the subject of a nationwide search. Forensic experts determined that the businessman met his demise through a gunshot wound to the head, followed by the gruesome dismemberment of his body. The remains were then meticulously packed into garbage bags and transported to an isolated area on the outskirts of the city. Pathologists concluded that the perpetrator must have possessed surgical skills or expertise akin to that of a seasoned butcher, given the precision and professionalism evident in the dissection, successfully separating the body parts. Initially, the investigation faced a lack of concrete leads, prompting a decision to commence the inquiry from the last known whereabouts of the deceased. The upscale residential complex where Marcos resided with his wife and daughter was outfitted with an array of surveillance cameras, and the footage was meticulously reviewed. It was revealed that on the evening preceding his disappearance, the couple had ordered pizza delivery to their home. The elevator camera footage captured Marcos descending to the first floor, returning with pizza boxes in hand, and subsequently entering their apartment. However, he was not observed leaving the apartment again that evening, nor during the night or the following day. It was as though Matsunaga had vanished within the confines of his own home. The morning after, his wife was seen leaving the apartment with 3 large-wheeled suitcases, notably laboring under their considerable weight. Investigators were quick to discern the nature of this luggage. On the same day, the businessman's widow was detained and brought to the police station for questioning. Initially, she attempted to deny any involvement and clung to the initial narrative that her husband had left her for another woman. However, when confronted with the elevator surveillance footage, she broke down in tears and began to confess. According to Alice, their marital life had deteriorated significantly, with no trace remaining of the man she had once idolized. Her husband had subjected her to humiliation, persistently reproaching her for her past work as an escort, claiming that he had rescued her from destitution. He even asserted that she was an inadequate mother to their daughter. Marcos had attempted to exert control over every aspect of her life, including her social interactions. When Alice had broached the topic of divorce, Marcos had scoffed and threatened to leave her with nothing, taking their child and barring her from seeing the daughter. Alice recounted that on that fateful evening, she had shown her husband pictures provided by the private detective which depicted Marcos with his mistress. His reaction had been one of anger. He slapped her, and after that, she claims that her memory becomes foggy. Alice could not recall how she ended up with a firearm in her hands, with which she shot her husband. Realizing the gravity of her actions, she decided to dispose of the body to make it appear as if he had vanished without a trace. Alice's background as a nurse provided her with a rudimentary knowledge of human anatomy, and her husband had taught her how to skin and butcher animal carcasses. They possessed the necessary tools at home, making the process a matter of technique. Remarkably, while Alice dismembered and packaged her husband's body, their young daughter slept soundly in the adjacent room, blissfully unaware of the horrifying events unfolding. From the outset, Alice's testimony raised numerous doubts and prompted questions. It became evident that the pictures and videos providing evidence of Marcos's infidelity were received by his wife from the private detective on May 20th, after she had allegedly killed her husband. As mentioned earlier, Alice had presented these visual materials to the businessman's parents, claiming that Marcos had abandoned her by eloping with his mistress. Natasha Lima, the woman involved in the affair with Marcos, was located and appeared in court as a witness. She recounted that Marcos himself had expressed the desire for a divorce, driven by fear of his wife. He believed Alice to be mentally unstable and capable of extreme actions. In their final meeting, which occurred the day before his disappearance, Marcos complained about the constant domestic disputes and disclosed his intent to relocate to Florida after selling the company, where he intended to establish a new venture. His plans did not include taking Alice with him. He was determined to divorce her and put the troubled marriage behind him. Another disturbing revelation emerged when experts detected blood in the deceased man's lungs, indicating that Marcos had still been alive and struggling to breathe when his wife severed his head from his body. This detail was both gruesome and horrifying. Alice vehemently denied this, insisting that her husband had died instantly from the gunshot. Pathologists also noted an unusual trajectory of the bullet entering Marcos's head, suggesting he may have been sitting or lying down and unprepared for the gunshot, as there were no signs of defensive wounds. Furthermore, nearly all the witnesses who testified during the trial disputed the notion that Matsunaga could have physically harmed his wife. While he possessed a challenging temperament and was prone to hurtful words, witnesses attested that he had never resorted to physical violence throughout his life. This led many to believe that Alice had fabricated the episode of her husband attacking her and her subsequent self-defense claims. Ultimately, the court found Alice Matsunaga guilty of premeditated murder with extreme cruelty and attempted concealment of the crime. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a penalty that some considered remarkably lenient given the severity of the crime. The responsibility of raising their daughter has now fallen to the parents of the deceased man. Thank you for joining us on True Crime Inspector. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more shocking stories in the future.